Daredevil Born Again just went 0 for 17. Every single episode, 2 full seasons, never once cracked the charts. And that's not a fluke. That's Disney, cutting Marvel's TV output in half. That's Wall Street telling them, to walk away from streaming entirely. And, honestly, the numbers, back them up, right? So today we're going through all of it. The report that, that started this. The stat that's even, worse than it sounds. The show, that's the clearest example of the, whole problem. And what it means for the next few years of Marvel, And this week, a Wells Fargo analyst named Stephen, Cahal dropped a, report on Disney. His argument is, Disney could see its, stock jump 40%. Not by making more Marvel shows, by making fewer of them. And, licensing the library out instead. He estimates, that it could be worth, $15 billion a year in licensing revenue alone, right? His words were like, Disney should go back to, its old business model, producing content, not distributing it, right? And his exact framing was that, the current streaming first strategy has been, quote, bad for shareholders, right? Think about that, what that means, right? The guy isn't saying, Marvel is, creatively bankrupt. He's saying that the business model, wrapped around it is the problem, basically, Lock your best IP, behind one app and you cap how much money it can make. License it out, basically, right? Let Netflix bid, let Amazon bid, let anyone bid. Suddenly Spider-Man is worth, more, not less. And, here's the twist, The second that report hit the market, Disney stock went up almost 2%. Wall Street didn't just tolerate the idea of, Marvel leaving Disney Plus, basically. This celebrated it, basically. That's not a subtle signal. That's the investors saying that, the things fans have been saying like for 2 years, basically, right? And, here's why that report is landing, so hard right now is like, in the first quarter of 2026, 95% of everything watched on Disney Plus was catalog. Old movies, old shows, stuff that existed before the platform even launched, Only 5% was new, original content. And that makes, Disney Plus the most catalog dependent major streamer, being tracked. People aren't subscribing to see what Marvel makes next. No, they're subscribing to rewatch what Marvel already made, right? And Disney Plus, still has 157 million paying subscribers. That's not like a small platform, right? That's like one of the biggest streamers on the planet, right? Running almost entirely on nostalgia. Like meanwhile, ad-supported free streaming is eating almost 19% of the all US TV viewing time, right? So Disney isn't just fighting Netflix and HBO Max anymore. They're fighting like a version of television that doesn't need a subscription at all, right? Which is why, Disney is even exploring a free, ad-supported tier of its own, right? Think about that for a second, right? The company built entirely on exclusivity is considering, giving some of it away for free. And nowhere is that clearer than Daredevil Born Again. 0 for 17 on Nielsen charts. Across 2 entire seasons, not one episode cracked the top 10. Season 2 lost roughly half its audience, and at one point it was reportedly performing worse than Echo. Like, Echo is widely considered Marvel's, lowest performing Disney Plus series, man. I did not even watch it. I did not even know it existed, right? And this wasn't a show that, phoned it in either, right? This was a show, Marvel tore apart and rebuilt, basically. Over half the season, was reshot. New head writer came in, right? They brought back Kieran Page. They brought back Bullseye. They recasted Vanessa Fisk, right? Just to bring back the actress from the Netflix era. They even, refilmed the children's choir scene because the original take, sounded, quote, like too polished for them, right? And that's how far they went to make this feel like the Daredevil people fell in love with a decade ago, right? And it still went 0 for 17. Not once. Like, if a full creative overhaul can't move the needle, that tells you the problem was never really about quality. It's about, where people are choosing to, spend their attention. And there's the same story with Wonder Man, by the way, right? strong reviews, generally different concept for an MCU show, fell off the charts like 1 week after anyway, right? Right, back in 2024, Kevin Feige, the guy who built the entire MCU, said something that aged very strangely. Honestly, right? He was on the Phase Zero podcast, pushing back on the idea of superhero fatigue at the time, right? But the phrase he used was the one that stuck. Or like it's almost the feeling of having to do homework fatigue. His argument then was that Marvel content isn't required viewing, that you don't have to keep up with all of it. That connectivity is a bonus, not a chore. Nice idea, but the charts 2 years later disagree, right? Because whether or not it was required, it started to feel like it required it, right? Once something starts to feel like homework, people stop doing the reading. They almost like certainly don't want to, go back and watch it, right? None of this happened, overnight, by the way, right? Rewind to like 2023, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania flops, the Marvels the Marvels becomes one of the lowest grossing films in MCU history, and behind the scenes, Bob Iger had just come back as CEO after Bob Chapek got pushed out, and Iger looked at all of it and basically said the quiet part out loud. Marvel had been, prioritizing quantity over quality for years, right? The audiences noticed like before the executives did, right? And research at the time from, Parrot and Analytics showed, demand for Marvel shows on Disney Plus dropping hard between around like 2022 and 2024, right? Fewer people were even searching for the shows anymore, right? let alone watching them. So Marvel, made a call. Slow down, fewer releases, longer gaps between shows, give people, room to breathe instead of, drowning them in content, right? And on paper, that basically should have worked, right? But fewer shows usually means each one gets more attention, more marketing dollars, more room to breathe. But except here we are, 2 years later, and even the slowed down quality over quantity version of the Marvel still can't, crack a chart, right? Which tells you that Fix wasn't just about pacing; it's about the whole container the shows live in. You can basically slow the assembly line down, all you want, right? If people already associate the brand with burnout, slowing down, doesn't erase that association like overnight. And because of that, Disney is responding, right? Again, like basically, Bob Iger is cutting Marvel TV's output from 4 shows a year down to 2, like half. A movie output is getting trimmed down to, right? Down to two or three movies a year instead of like the flood we saw, a few years ago. That's not like a quiet pivot. That's basically an admission that you don't cut your flagship franchises, output in half twice in 3 years if the first fix actually worked, right? And now, like, to be fair to Disney here, Iger himself has pushed back on all of this. Yes, he's rejected the superhero fatigue narrative outright. His argument is that fans don't want less Marvel, they basically want better Marvel, right? And there's a real case for staying the course too, right? Disney Plus still has franchise hold that nobody else has. Marvel, Pixar, Star Wars, all in one place. Even a struggling, original can act as a funnel toward new signups. And that ad-supported tier isn't just defense, right? It could be like a whole new pipeline into paid subscriptions. There are even, reports Disney is exploring AI-generated engagement formats as part of the deal, which worth close to basically like $1 billion. So this isn't like a simple story of Marvel TV being dead. It's like a story of strategy, under real pressure to prove itself, right? And honestly, like this isn't just a Marvel problem, right? Like this is bigger than that, right? It's a basically a streaming industry problem, wearing, a Marvel costume. Every major platform, locked its best corner behind its own walled garden for years. Disney did it, Warner did it, everyone basically did it, right? And the entire industry is now dealing with, subscriber fatigue at the same time. People are tired of juggling 5 different apps to, watch 5 different shows. So, when Wall Street says license the content out, what they're really saying is stop assuming, exclusivity is automatically, valuable. Sometimes, the smartest business move is just meeting people where they already are instead of demanding they come to you, right? And honestly, like DC, like props to them, like they figured that part already. The Penguin picked up 24 Emmy nominations on HBO, that like not even the same house as the DC movies, right? That ties for the most nomination HBO landed all year, right? It's not the only bet DC's made outside its own, core lane either. The absolute line in comics, took huge creative swings on lesser known characters, right? Instead of just, leaning on name recognition, and it's part of why, DC's reportedly clawed back its, spot as the leading comics publisher this year, right? And now look at Marvel's own, Spider-Noir, Nicolas Cage, right? Full noir, reimagining of Spider-Man. Premiered on what? MGM Plus first, and then dropped its full 8-episode run on Prime Video. Not Disney Plus, right? Because Sony's, basically owned Spider-Man streaming rights since a deal back in 1999, and that reportedly cost them just $7 million, like the best $7 million anyone's ever spent. Sony can put Spider-Man wherever the audience already is. DC isn't treating one platform as the only home for its universe either, right? Marvel for the first time is forced to try that too, whether they wanted it to or not, right? And so, where does this actually honestly go from here, right? I don't think Disney, Plus disappears. Like the 157 million subscribers and the entire back catalog makes sure of that, right? But don't be shocked if you start seeing more Marvel shows pop up on platforms that aren't Disney Plus. A Netflix deal here, Amazon deal here, right? Maybe even a free ad-supported version of Disney's own service, sitting right alongside the paid one. Daredevil Born Again already has a season 3 in production, right? Reportedly building toward a full, Defenders reunion, which tells you that, Marvel isn't giving up on TV yet, right? They are just done pretending every show needs to be an event, basically. And here's, where I land on this, right? The 6-episode Marvel Disney Plus show, the way, we knew it, is basically done. Not because, Marvel, ran out of ideas, because the model stopped matching how people actually watch television in 2026, right? You can reshoot half a season. You can bring back every fan favorite character, from the Netflix era. You can even, get the reviews right. None of it matters if the platform itself has become the, the obstacle. Fewer shows, bigger swings, maybe even shows that, live somewhere other than, Disney Plus. Honestly, right? And that is not like a death of the, Marvel. That's Marvel finally admitting that, the homework fatigue was actually real. And for the first time, people holding the checkbook actually agree, right? And now basically you might be thinking, right? Okay, this is probably a corporate strategy story, right? Like, why do I care? Here's why. I'm going to be honest with you. I watched Loki. I watched What If season 1. I watched Hawkeye. I watched WandaVision. And then I completely stopped. Right? Not because, I stopped liking Marvel, because I realized I needed to watch 4 different shows just to understand why one character was showing up in the next movie. Right? That was fine, when it was just movies connecting to each other. Shows, no, that is too much, right? And I don't think I'm the exception here, right? I think I'm exactly who these numbers are describing, right? Every decision we just talked about changes, what actually ends up on your screen. Fewer shows means each one has to, justify its own existence. And that's good news if, like me, you got tired of needing a homework list just to follow one movie. It's bad news if your favorite side character was hoping to be, have their own spin-off series, right? So this isn't just like just a Wall Street story. It's like a preview of what your Friday night watch list looks like a year from now, right? And if you honestly want to see, where a lot of this platform's tension started, go back and, watch my episode on the Xbox pivot and the Phil Spencer's exit. Like same exact kind of story, different studio, different listen, right? Xbox went all in on multi-platform, to chase revenue wherever it could find. Now Disney's, staring down a version of that same fork in the road with Marvel. Every studio, eventually has to ask the same basic question. How much is exclusivity actually worth? Versus just meeting people where they already are. Marvel's just asking it in real time and in front of all of us, basically, right? So, if you enjoyed watching this episode, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. And, tell anyone who wants to know about this story. And it means a lot for like small creator like me, and you can follow me on Spotify, follow me on, YouTube, follow me on Twitter as well. So this is Tanveer Talks. See you in the next episode. Peace.